Across the fields and the farms of Ireland, there's a problem. Too many of these. The demand for milk from here has risen so rapidly that in 10 years the number of cows has gone up by 500,000. The methane they produce is an increasing factor in global warming. There are just too many cattle, but rather than kill maybe as many as 200,000 of them just because of greenhouse gases, there is another idea. That answer could lie offshore with a ready and rapidly self-replicating crop that's been used for centuries as food and for health by humans. Now they're looking at the world of aquaculture for agriculture. Too much methane? Feed the cows this. Seaweed. That could well be the answer. Welcome to Beyond Borders. In the Caribbean clear waters of Connemara, off the west coast of Ireland, it's harvest time.
There's too much water here. We'll try another place inside.
Are you looking for these rocks, or...?
Yeah. Tide is too high yet.
Father and son, Coleman Dundas and Colm, switch between Irish and English as they collect kelp, a brown seaweed that studies have shown can reduce methane emissions if used in cattle feed. So you have to cut it, do you?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a good strong root. You see the size of the root. Yeah. It will be easier now when the tide goes out further, like, yeah. We're just doing bits and pieces here now while we're waiting, like.
Seaweed is also good at capturing harmful carbon gases. Useful when trees often do that job, and there aren't that many in Ireland. It has other benefits too. One of the things that Callum here has told me is that this has healing properties. It's got a lot of iodine in it. And if you get the root here, cut it like that, take this broken edge and put it on a cut, pretty much instantly it stops bleeding. We're off to a farmer's cattle auction soon to ask what they think of the new food and the possibility of a cull to cut methane. But before that, we see where today's crop is going and how seaweed is becoming big business in Ireland. Just down the coast, they're cultivating abalone.
I'm going to lift that and see.
Described as a culinary delicacy and one of the world's most expensive seafoods. A leading UK chef has recently paid a visit and been told that kelp is the best food for a mollusk that's also called a sea snail and a stomach on a foot.
Seaweed in general is now, I think, in growing demand globally. As a food, it's a very nutritious food item. As a fertilizer, which is, I suppose, a lower value commodity, but still there's a lot of demand for it.
So this is the sea lettuce. You want to grow it, you were going to say, I'm sorry I interrupted, you were going to want to grow it all the year round, but it's actually a 6-month plant at the moment. But
it likes the warm water, but there are different varieties that have a higher tolerance to colder water. So with the university, they're looking at different strains of the ulva that grow locally in Connemara and in the Galway region. And then with these trials, we have a space dedicated at the back to then cultivate them and see which ones do the best.
But why do you want to have a year-round plant?
Why? because it's a really tasty seaweed, for one. It's very nutritious food, and chefs like it all year round. As global warming increases and we're putting stress on our freshwater systems, seaweed and algae are a food that we can produce with seawater, which is abundant, and it kind of frees up then our freshwater resources for at least drinking and other important things. So I do think there's a huge potential for seaweed going into the future.
At this cattle market, the auction of mostly beef stock is underway. Climate activists have their sights set now on dairy herds, but they still see beef cattle as a problem.
I don't actually think that the food that's produced in Ireland is the most detrimental to the environment by virtue of the fact of the way it's produced. It's generally grass-based. It's not fed from imported grains. But I suppose if you're to be part of a global community and a global discussion, you probably have to buy into the fact that there are too many cattle. We'll have to cut them back a bit.
I think that there has to be fairness in the way that the whole, in the way the policies are structured, So, I mean, making the climate better is a good idea. I support that. If I have to have 10 cattle less, I have no problem with that. When Europe signs agreements with South America, what did the South Americans do? Burn thousands of acres of the Amazon rainforest. We're doing everything according to the rules, the book. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So, the European Union have a responsibility to check where they're buying their beef, and maybe the 25% reduction here might not be such a good idea.
Because we're part of the EU, we're getting subsidies, so it's more of a holdover of the subsidies now, because to get the subsidies you have to follow the rules, and if you don't follow the rules, you can't sell your product at the end of the day. So as you can see, I'm probably the youngest person here, one of the few young people by about 30 years like this. People that are actually getting into farming, they're very rare. That's where my passion is, and that's all I do every day and all I think about. But it's I don't know, is it a sickness more than anything? But one good day can make up for a lot of bad days.
From beef to dairy, and Enda Armstrong is bringing home the herd for evening milking.
We've got 140 cows in here, and
150.
150. I would think a quarter of them at any one time are delivering greenhouse gases. So, okay, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but is it an issue that you're aware of?
No, because cows were always there. So I don't believe that they're as big an issue as been made out. I believe that...
While we're talking, let's go around and...
I believe the biggest issue, it's an easy thing for them to pin the blame on, because it's probably one of the easiest ones for them to slap a regulation on, is farming and restrict us. So perhaps...
Well, if that isn't the problem, what is?
The problem? There's just industry, and sure, when COVID struck and when the planes stopped flying, it seemed to, the ozone seemed to repair. So perhaps the fuels that are being burnt in engines are a bigger issue.
So you don't think this methane is a real issue?
Well, it is an issue. Don't get me wrong, I believe it is an issue, but...
They know they're going to get some food, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
They also know their udders are going to be emptied.
Yeah, well, anything new
You can see they're ready to be milked.
I
Look.
get curious. What?
If you could have a food supplement that actually helped increase the yield and cut down the emissions, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would be super.
There we go.
It can be a messy affair.
The delights of filming on the farm. At least it's just, you know what? I know I'm going to get one right on top of my head in a moment, aren't I?
Ah, no, it should be fine.
So how much milk could you get, Enda, from one of these every day?
Well, it depends on the time of the year. This time of the year now, they're gone past their peak. So there would have been a peak, April, May time. We start calving in the end of January, and we continue then until about the first week of April. Cows at the moment would be, they're averaging about.
The thing is, we've given you
17
that
or
little
18.
bag. It's not going to be enough to tell whether there's much of a difference. Would you be prepared to invest in it? Because it might cost you a couple of £100 to check and see if things were changing.
Oh yeah, well I would. I wouldn't rule out anything. Like like we try and implement things here. If we're going to see positive results out of it, that would be the hope. Like,
and if that helped, you know, the emissions problem and back to net zero. I know you're only one business, but if that helped, that would be something you'd be prepared to pay a little bit of money for.
Yeah, we would. Yeah, because like we've done it in the past. We use protected urea here on the farm. It's a bit more expensive than the standard urea products, but we've been willing to pay that bit extra for it because it has the environmental benefit.
I can see why you've got these overalls on.
Yes.
Because I've got it here, I've got it in my hair. I'm going to see you in a little bit, okay? Should have worn the right clothes.
He's agreed to give his animals some seaweed feed additive that we've brought with us.
This is it. This is the seaweed supplement. It's probably bladderwrack. You know, the one that you can sometimes find on the beach that pops. It's been picked, it's been dried, it's been prepared. And Enda, that's for you. Give it to one of your cows, if you don't mind, and tell us what she thinks.
It's too early to say if it did anything at all, but the cow appears to like it. A cull is likely to happen, says this Irish farming journalist.
We've had massive expansion of dairy production and dairy cow numbers in Ireland over the last 8 years since the removal of quotas. Unfortunately, the level and rate of expansion means that the carbon footprint of Irish farming in general is not in line with the requirements under the Climate Action Plan. We have to reduce emissions from 2018 to 2030 by 25%, so some changes have to be made.
And the most controversial suggestion is what?
A voluntary cow cull, which would be funded presumably by government, although that has not been finally decided. This has come up within a forum which has been set up around the Food Vision Group, which is, I suppose, a government strategy with all stakeholders involved, which is planning agriculture through the decade to 2030.
He thinks many older farmers will see it as a chance to add to their retirement pots with any compensation that's offered. Maybe €2,000 for each beast that's slaughtered.
There are pressures within dairy farming. The average age of Irish farmers is about 57, so a lot of dairy farmers now getting older. Labour shortages are an issue, so the idea was a voluntary cull to take out those farmers and their land from milk production, which would help to bring the carbon footprint of our farming overall down. Some farmers would love to see that coming. There are farmers who are hanging on in the hope that such a scheme comes in, effectively a retirement scheme, but the farm organisations are opposed on principle to a cull.
At the Ashtown Food Research Centre near Dublin, they're trying to find local seaweed that can mimic the methane reductions found with this Australian and New Zealand Asparagopsis, up to 80%. When it's as little as 2% of the cattle feed, but with its key element known to potentially cause cancer.
At this point in time, we have screened 2 very bioactive seaweeds where we found anti-methane activity in the lab in our artificial cow's stomach. And we've also trialled those seaweeds in animal trials in sheep and cattle. In the animal, we saw a methane reducing effect of about 10 to 11%. In the general scheme of things, because the active didn't have a negative effect on the animal, it didn't reduce the daily weight gain of the animal, which is important for farmers because ultimately these animals are going to be consumed, and the price you're paid at a mart or by factories depends on the weight of the animal. And it actually had additional health benefits for the animal, you know. So overall, we're quite pleased with it.
By measuring methane produced from different feeds with equipment like this, they've already seen some success. It could all be a boon for the cattle industry, for climate activists, and for those eager for a bigger seaweed market.
We have been cultivating seaweed in Ireland for many hundreds of years. It's something that many Irish people would be really familiar with seeing as fertiliser on fields. So it's something that is a very ancient and old farming tradition in Ireland. But what we have realised over the last number of years is that there's an enormous global demand now for seaweed. The EU, for example, is saying that they would project a demand for about €9 billion worth of seaweed by 2030. So there's an enormous opportunity for our coastal communities to really try to harness this opportunity that exists at the moment. Well, we know at the moment that 25 farms is just not enough for it to be economically viable. So we'd like to see that triple or quadruple or even multiply tenfold. The seaweed that we have been harvesting over the last hundreds of years has generally been wild seaweed. So that is continuing, but really we're focused on the farm seaweed. So we'd like to see perhaps 100 farms here, and then that would make it more economically viable for everybody.
One of Ireland's leading restaurateurs shows us how versatile seaweed can be with 3 separate dishes.
I mean, we're kind of like a little bit poetic on the way we write our dishes. This is just called oysters and seaweed, or it's just oyster, comma, seaweed. There's nothing else. No.
So we've got oyster mayonnaise,
sea truffle, oyster,
an oyster that's been blowtorched
with a little bit of rapeseed
charred,
oil,
yeah.
And we have a little bit of alkaline and sea salt, and then this is seaweed jelly. So this is the kind of pickling liquid from the channel rack that we've taken with agar. So if you want to, it's almost like instead of putting lemon juice on an oyster. I always think lemon juice is
that's wonderful, because it's not as sharp as lemon, but it's still got the essence of lemon.
It's still got acidic, but it's also kind of saline as well. And then we are going to put on a little bit of our channel rack, and then we'll finish with a little bit of our sea lettuce. Just a little bit of alkaline and sea salt.
One go?
Yeah, well, you one go. There's loads of other things. This has kind of like a cucumbery taste. Try that. This is sea sandworth. It's another little wild sea herb, and it has a kind of slight cucumbery flavour. It's good.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's nice. It's very oceanic. The main thing for our seaweed is our sauce. Sabi is just putting in dillisk and sea lettuce and some trout caviar, and we have some of our arrowgrass in there as well. So we have dillisk and sea lettuce primarily. This, hopefully now you won't be able to eat this in one. So this one we designed because we don't have a seaweed dessert on at the moment. So I said, for you guys, how will we put seaweed into a dessert and make sure you get
You've made this just for us?
Just for you guys, yeah.
So it's the Beyond Borders.
This is one day only. This is today.
Unless it proves very popular.
That's true.
We'll let them know.
Yes. So these are little alpine strawberries. These are the original wild European strawberry. And then we have one of our little petit fours, which is chocolate with stout and dillisk. We have an oat and dillis cookie, a kelp ice cream. Then we have some sweetened dillis around the outside, some wild strawberries and some marigolds. Sea lettuce doesn't work so well in dessert. It's interesting when the redder and browner seaweeds work better in breads and pastry, and the greener seaweeds work better in fish and vegetable dishes.
In this part of Ireland, there's a certain atmosphere to be soaked up and soaked in.
See the parts that have been in the hot water. So once that sits, it'll start, you can see the oils already coming off it there. So we just let it steep there, almost like tea, for a couple of minutes in the hot water just to start it all off.
What we're seeing now is seaweed at its finest. You can see that it's just losing all its oils. You can kind of see that kind of slurpy. That's all the natural goodness in the seaweed coming out with the hot water.
What do they say it does to you? Not how it makes you feel, but what does it actually do to the body, do you think?
For me personally, it's a fabulous antioxidant. Now, I also suffer from back pain, which is basically inflammation, and it's kind of like it completely alleviates that, if not eliminates that. My skin isn't too bad, but people that suffer with eczema or psoriasis find it absolutely fabulous as well. It's basically a fabulous natural spa, and you cannot get this kind of thing out of a bottle. Maybe 2 hours a week, if it can be, maybe every 2 weeks. You're literally a different person if you have a seaweed bath. It just does so much for you.
Well, the boat's gone down a bit with me on it.
All right, dive it down on the other side.
So we're going out to the island.
Right now on the west coast, they're just happy to show us how plentiful the crop can be as we head to Inishlaken, an island only accessible by boat.
Nobody's lived on it full time since the 70s, when the islands were... There was 113 people at one stage living on the island.
So if people lived on this island, how did they get there?
A lot of it, I suppose, they would have been very close with the Erla community as well, which is across here where I'm from. This would have been for where all my family for generations would be from. So they'd row in their curragh, they'd be selling fish, small bit of farming. Of course, they'd have seaweed as well, bit of lobster fishing, you know. That'd be mainly how they lived, you know. When the weather was good, there's nowhere like it. It would have been a great life. Then when weather was harsh, it could have been a tough life, you know. So this is the serrated rack. This is the stuff you want for your seaweed baths. This is what takes out all the proper oils, you know. And it's just the oils that come out of it that's actually amazing for your skin. But basically you just cut it off the rock. You don't want to cut it too close because otherwise it's going to take too long to grow back. So it's just, cut it, leave a bit of growth, and then you'll have it again for the following. It'll take about 2 years to grow back to 3 years probably to grow back perfect, you know. But so you come along then and cut away. And usually you're going to wait on a low tide and you're going to get as much ground. Everyone would have their own areas, you know. So it's all dependent on...
So are there seaweed wars?
There can be seaweed wars, yeah. If you see the knife, come and get out of there. But there can be. Everyone would have their own grounds as such, though. So it's just, you've got... it's the same with the fishing. You know, it could be handed down for generations, the area you have, and there'd be rights for that certain part of the ground then, you know. So that's the bubble rack then that you have. You're going to have the bubble rack. A lot of that goes to the factory. So that's, we'll say, for the cattle feed and stuff, you know. So that's the difference that you have.
When it's wet, you can pop them, but you can't when they're as hard as
exactly, and the oils that are in them, and then they dry them, and all that they use, then they have it it's got a longer shelf life as well. You see.
Yeah.
That's the way it works, you know.
Fantastic.
Agriculture is responsible for 1/3 of all of Ireland's emissions. Yet here it's felt that from high-end dinner tables to the cattle trough and beyond, maybe embracing this crop of the sea could provide a climate change that would for once be welcome.